You're listening to episode 137 of the Father Bills podcast. Welcome back. Well, I told you if you listened to the last episode that I wasn't going to be back this week for an episode. However, the Oregon Star Party, which I was going to, got canceled due to smoke. We got smoked out by fires nearby, and so I returned on Saturday, and so I went to Mass, and this is the homily given by Father Dominic entitled The Wheat and the Weeds, given on the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2026.
Fortunate that I was scheduled to preach today because I have something of an expertise in the theme of our gospel today, which is weeds. Spent a lot of quality time in my youth assiduously studying weeds, sent there by my loving parents to help forward the family project. And that is interesting because I have sort of transformed. They say we become our parents, and now I find it somewhat satisfying to pull the weeds out of my garden and to clean the place up and beat back the blackberries. Someone last night said, well, we have a lot of weeds. You could come and do ours. I said, I'm not saying I necessarily enjoy it, but it's somewhat satisfying. I mean, there's something good about getting those weeds out. Something good about having the place look nice, having it look clean and ordered. And I think that is certainly something that is within all of us. Maybe not just those of a, Northern European persuasion, but all Americans, I think, share in this from our founding, right? The Puritans came to this country precisely to make a perfect weed-free garden. Right? They were like, over here in England, there's all these weeds and everything, and we want to go over to America and we want to make this city on a hill, this perfect Puritan paradise in which all these problems will be solved, and we'll have everything in neat and ordered rows, and we can expel from our colony anyone that doesn't really fit our criteria. And so I think we all probably have, to some extent, inherited that. We participate in that. That can be our attitude towards problems. It can be the attitude of the weed puller, right? We want to pull out those weeds, make everything nice. What's with all these problems here? And that's a dangerous instinct when it's not directed at literal weeds. We could start to think, this office would be a nicer place if it wasn't for that person. That person's kind of like a weed. If they weren't here, everything would be great. Or the problem with this country is that all those people in that party or that politician, they're all kind of like weeds. Somebody needs to pull them out, and then everything would be better. And it could even happen in our church community. This choir would be so much better. This women's group would be so much better. This men's club would be so much better if it wasn't for so-and-so. And so that weed-pulling instinct that we have can be directed on to people. And I think we all experience that. And there's a twist in this gospel that we don't really realize when we just read the gospel as we have it here, because it says weeds. But Jesus doesn't say weeds, Jesus says darnel. And darnel looks just like wheat. Right? Darnel's not a dandelion or a thistle or something like that. Darnel is indistinguishable from wheat until it actually comes to produce its seed. And so our weed-pulling attitude can lead us to cause damage to our communities and to other people. And I think that's the message Christ is trying to convey to us. If we go around with that weed-pulling zeal, we might mistake wheat for weeds. And in fact, we ourselves might be mistaken for weeds. And I don't think any of us want to be pulled out. And so that's where we have to go very carefully. And that's where the master of the harvest gives that very frustrating advice that would have outraged our Puritan forebears and probably outrages us. Don't pull out the weeds. Let the weeds grow. Let them grow until the harvest. And then at that time, things will be separated, and the master of the harvest will separate them out. Don't you worry about that. The weeds are my problem. And I think that points us in the right direction, right? When we're tempted to think about other people being the problem, when we're tempted to think about this person, this person, my family, when we're looking outside of ourselves, we get into trouble. And there's only one thing that we can do. Because the good news is that we are not plants. We are not weeds. We're not wheat. We're human beings. And so we have a choice. I get to choose whether I'm going to be a weed or whether I'm going to be wheat. And I am the only one in charge of that, right? I'm in charge of my own garden, my own fruit. I can improve. That's what we were talking about last week, right? With the sower and the good soil. I can improve my soil. I can pull out the weeds in my life. Because far from being a weed, my life might be cluttered with weeds. My life is more like a garden. And that's what I can do. I can take that weed-pulling zeal and I can direct it towards myself and towards my own heart. I can pull those weeds out that are getting in the way of my relationship with others. I can prepare my soil, and I can bear good fruit, as it said last week, 30, 50, or 100-fold. And what will that be based on? What will my harvest be based on? Well, St. John of the Cross once said, at the end of our lives, we will be judged not on what we have done, but on how much we have loved.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bill's podcast. If you have any questions or comments, I encourage you just to go to my webpage at fatherbill.org, FRBILL.org. There I have links to my blog, podcasts, a liturgy page, photos, and some various links, news, and other kinds of things of my interest that maybe you'd be interested in as well. In the meantime, may God bless you and have a great week. Bye-bye.